There is someone in your life right now who has never once raised their voice at you, never made a direct demand, never threatened you. They simply suffer, quietly, visibly, consistently, and somehow, you spend more energy managing their feelings than you spend on anything else in your life. Friedrich Nietzsche called this the most powerful form of control a human being can exercise over another. And the reason nobody talks about it is simple. Admitting it exists means admitting that suffering can be a weapon. Friedrich Nietzsche was born in 1844 and spent his entire life saying things that made comfortable people deeply uncomfortable. Not because he was wrong, because he was precise about things.
I have labored for weeks, my lord.
Most people preferred to leave unnamed.
I dare not face the cardinal without your seal of approval.
He published on the genealogy of morality, one of the most unsettling books ever written about human behavior. In it, he described a psychological pattern he called ressentiment. A person who cannot dominate through strength learns to dominate through weakness. A person who cannot win through power rewrites the rules of the game until losing becomes a form of winning. This is not a video about dismissing real pain. Genuine suffering is real and deserves genuine compassion. This is about a specific pattern Nietzsche identified with uncomfortable accuracy, one that most people live inside 4 years without ever seeing it clearly. It starts with the thing nobody wants to say out loud. Part 1. Weakness as the ultimate weapon. Think about the last time someone made you feel guilty for something you were not entirely sure you did wrong. They did not threaten you. They did not demand anything directly. They simply made their suffering visible. A long silence. A heavy sigh. A look that said, "You did this to me." And you changed your behavior. Not because they forced you, but because their visible pain felt like something you were responsible for fixing. Nietzsche observed that this is not accidental. The person who cannot say "I want this" learns instead to say, through behavior, through silence, through suffering, "Look what you are doing to me." One is a request. The other is a verdict. And here is why verdicts are so much more powerful than requests. A request can be declined. A verdict has to be argued against. And arguing against someone's suffering makes you look like the villain before you have said a single word. This is what Nietzsche meant when he described weakness as a strategy. Not weakness in the ordinary sense, but weakness deployed with precision, placed exactly where it will generate the maximum amount of guilt. In the people closest to you. The uncomfortable part is not that this exists. The uncomfortable part is how familiar it sounds when you hear it described out loud. Part 2. Why your guilt is their control. Guilt is not just an emotion. It is one of the most effective behavioral tools in human social life. Psychologist Robert Cialdini spent years studying the mechanics of influence and compliance. His research showed that the feeling of obligation, the sense that you owe someone something, overrides rational thinking more reliably than almost any other social force. Nietzsche described the same mechanism from a completely different angle. A full century before Cialdini's research existed, he observed that once a person makes you feel responsible for their condition, once their suffering becomes something your choices are causing, they have more control over your behavior than any authority figure could ever achieve. Because authority can be resisted, guilt cannot be left behind. It follows you into rooms they are not in. It wakes you up at 3 in the morning. It makes you quietly shrink your own life to avoid the weight of expanding theirs. Picture someone who responds to your good news with a story about their own pain, who becomes visibly wounded when you succeed, who reminds you, consistently, subtly, of everything they have sacrificed, specifically in the moments when your life is going well. Nietzsche was careful about something here, and this is the part most people miss. When they first encounter his ideas, he did not say this is always deliberate. Many people who operate this way have no conscious awareness that they are doing it. The suffering feels completely real to them, which is exactly what makes it so effective. The most convincing performance is the one the performer has forgotten is a performance. But there is a darker layer underneath even this, something Nietzsche identified, that goes beyond guilt and behavior control. Something that happens slowly, over months and years, that most people only recognize long after it has already happened to them. Part 3. How it rewrites who you are. This is the part of Nietzsche's argument that almost nobody discusses. He did not just argue that ressentiment controls behavior. He argued that over time, it rewrites the moral framework of the people exposed to it. In the beginning, you feel guilty for specific things. A decision you made. A boundary you set. A moment when you chose yourself over their comfort. But slowly, almost invisibly, something larger shifts. Good begins to mean minimizing their suffering. Bad begins to mean anything that prioritizes your own needs. Your ambition becomes selfishness. Your happiness becomes a provocation. Your growth becomes evidence that you do not care about them enough. Your boundaries become cruelty. Psychiatrist Bessel van der Kolk, in his landmark work The Body Keeps the Score, documented how people who grow up in environments where their own needs were consistently treated as less important than someone else's emotional state often lose the ability to identify what they actually want. They become so practiced at reading and responding to another person's suffering that their own inner voice grows quieter and quieter until they can barely hear it at all. This is what Nietzsche warned about when he described ressentiment as the most sophisticated form of power the human mind has ever produced. It does not need threats. It does not need force. It simply needs enough time and enough guilt to make you forget that your own life was supposed to be yours. Part 4: How to see it clearly without becoming cold. Everything in this video could be misused to dismiss real suffering. That is not the point. And it would be the wrong conclusion. Nietzsche's observation is not a weapon to use against people in pain. It is a lens. A way of asking one honest question. When you notice a pattern repeating in your life, whose behavior changes in this relationship? And in which direction does it always move? If you are consistently the one becoming smaller, more apologetic, more accommodating, more careful about your own happiness, in direct proportion to how much they suffer, that asymmetry deserves your attention. The clearest signal is this. When you try to set a boundary, does the other person engage with it? Or does the boundary itself immediately become a new source of their suffering? If your attempt to protect yourself consistently becomes the cause of their pain, you are not dealing with someone who is hurting. You are dealing with someone who's hurt, has learned to function as a permanent veto over your right to exist on your own terms. Recognizing this does not require becoming hard. It requires becoming honest. Honest about the difference between someone who needs your compassion and someone whose need for your compassion has become the mechanism of your captivity. Nietzsche wrote in Beyond Good and Evil, the secret for harvesting from existence, the greatest fruitfulness and the greatest enjoyment, is to live dangerously. What he meant by dangerous was not reckless. He meant the danger of seeing clearly, of refusing to look away from uncomfortable truths about the people around you and the dynamics you have been living inside. Most people never take that risk. It is easier to keep managing the suffering, easier to keep shrinking, easier to keep calling the guilt love, because love is a word you can live with, and captivity is not. You are not obligated to carry someone else's suffering as the price of your own existence. Real love does not cost you the ability to grow. Real care does not require you to make yourself smaller so that someone else can feel bigger. Nietzsche saw this clearly in 1887. The question is whether you are willing to see it now. Cognilux. We don't motivate. We clarify. Subscribe before someone uses this on you.